Let me ask you something. Is the Punisher a good guy? In the last few years, as culture war nonsense has grown online, and increasingly imagery from popular fiction has been co-opted by far-right actors, there has been an ongoing trend on social media where well-meaning people then respond to this by claiming, no, Spider-Man would hate racists. No, Superman is a leftist. In most cases, these people are correct. After all, superheroes are good people who do good things. They are not bigoted because their purpose is to sell comic books, and the best way to do that is to be a character that people like. Which brings us to the Punisher. Frank Castle has, like many other pieces of popular media, had his symbols co-opted by the far right, especially by pro-police actors seeking to counter public outrage at police brutality, and this then has created a counter-narrative online. A well-meaning one, but one that we have to dispel today. If you like this video, like, subscribe, write to your estranged auntie and tell her it's a revelation. So, to begin, let's look at the main piece of evidence people use to claim that our buddy Frank is a big old lefty. It's this page, where we see some cops telling Frank that they have a group of other cops who idolize the Punisher, and that they want to take back their streets using his methods. Frank rebukes them and says, "We're not the same. You took an oath to uphold the law. You don't do what I do. Nobody does. You boys need a role model. His name is Captain America." So here we have a pretty clear message. Cops who co-opt Frank's symbols are no bueno in his book. You can almost see why this gets trotted out so much as proof of his left-wing sympathies. But hang on, let's take a closer look at how he couches this argument. You took an oath to uphold the law. You protect people. You need a role model. His name's Captain America. Now, call me crazy, but to me this doesn't sound so much like Frank taking a staunch anti-brutality stance as much as it sounds more like Frank trying to distance himself from the noble, honest work of policing. It sounds less like Frank showing his disgust with open criminals and more like him showing his respect for the work of law enforcement. What Frank is really conveying here is not that he looks down on police or that he sees these guys as upstarts trying to compare themselves to him. It's actually the exact opposite. Frank looks up to police because he hates himself. He knows what he does is wrong, and he sees himself as so base and so filthy that noble members of the NYPD should be above him. They should aspire to the pristine image of Captain America, not the gutter work that the Punisher does. So then, if I'm claiming that the Punisher is not in fact a left-wing symbol, what am I claiming? Does the fact that he stands apart from the law, hunted by police for his mass murders, not render him a revolutionary figure in some way? I'd like to begin my explanation of who Frank Castle is by talking about an entirely separate comic book character. Sorry about that. Walter Kovacs, aka Rorschach. Rorschach is the primary protagonist of the 1986 comic series Watchmen, written by Alan Moore with art by Dave Gibbons. Watchmen is by now so famous for its deconstruction of superheroes that most people forget to ask what that deconstruction actually entails. Case in point, Rorschach. Kovacs is a loner. He's a far-right nut who reads a daily neo-Nazi newspaper and who puts a mask on at night to hunt degenerates. Kovacs likes to think of himself as an investigator, but he's not the type to let a silly thing like lack of evidence keep him from dispensing his justice. In the world of Watchmen, vigilantes are not noble, shining beacons, they're people who engage in nightly acts of extrajudicial violence for their own perverse reasons. Whether it's a hateful urge to kill, or the desire for sexual gratification, or simply the base need to show power over others, the heroes of Watchmen are no heroes. Rorschach is famously an analogue for The Question, a character created by Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko to act as a mouthpiece for his Randian objectivist philosophy, but he similarly works as a counterpart for the Punisher. Both are violent loners who reject the law, who see themselves, however unconsciously, as true arbiters of justice, who kill those that they deem to be lesser than themselves. So what's the difference? Rorschach is a critique. He's the protagonist of Watchmen, and he's a character that you are supposed to feel deeply uncomfortable about accompanying. Why do you root for this man? Why do you want him to succeed? By contrast, there is very little critique to the core concept of the Punisher. In actual fact, Frank Castle as a protagonist serves as a libertarian power fantasy. Think about it. A man who served in the military, who came home with trauma and deadly capabilities. A man who sees his family murdered in front of him. A man who owns guns, knows how to use them, and does. The core of the Punisher's psyche is the belief that he is more effective than typical policing. Is this not the ultimate fantasy of those who deeply love and defend their Second Amendment rights? The fantasy that one day they might be able to show the world just how necessary it is for a guy in the suburbs to own an automatic weapon? The fantasy that some tragedy might morally absolve them of any guilt over their desire to purge degenerates and filth from the streets? The Punisher is a conservative idea, one that convinces us that an individual unrestrained by a need to respect the law might finally do what we think needs to be done. Does that sound left-wing to you? 'Cause it doesn't to me. For even more evidence, let's look at the recent Disney Plus special, The Punisher: One Last Kill, and see how well this reading holds up. This special is, in fact, a full-throated confirmation of everything we've been saying so far. It begins with Frank in an area of the city that has collapsed into riots and lawlessness. After mulling over his deceased family, the matriarch of the Nucci crime family tells Frank that at 6:47 p.m, every murderer and hired gun in the city will descend on his home to collect a bounty that she's placed on his head. What follows is standard Punisher fare. Bad men try to kill Frank and he kills them first. But it's important to note that these men are not just trying to kill Frank. They attack, assault, and violate anyone in their path. They're not acting like hired assassins, they're acting like animals, which is why we feel good when Frank puts them down. Frank is just a normal dude, but with his skills and weapons he's able to punish the degenerates who try to destroy his way of life. This is an example that proves how difficult it is to actually tell a story with this character as a protagonist. How you have to walk this line between being the Punisher is sad, but also understanding that the audience is only there to see the Punisher. So how can it be done well? How can you tell a story about the Punisher that avoids these sinister framings? After all, a character being an embodiment of conservative ideals or reactionary instincts does not mean that you cannot use that character well. But how do you do that? Well, the first and most obvious way is to go back to his roots. There is a reason that Frank Castle originated as a Spider-Man villain. Using him as an antagonist to a non-lethal hero provides a vehicle for interesting questions around the use of lethal force on people as obviously and severely evil as the Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus. Now, of course, these questions are only as interesting as the writer is willing to explore them seriously. The other way to use Frank well is to seriously interrogate his ideas, his beliefs, why he does what he does. We see a literal example of this in the Punisher's best live-action appearance to date, Daredevil Season 2. In Daredevil, we are introduced to Frank at the beginning of his Punisher journey. He wipes out the criminal organizations responsible for the deaths of his family and is taken in by Daredevil. The two clash on a fundamental level. Matt Murdock believes in repentance. He holds his Catholic faith close to his heart and truly believes that people can change their ways. Matt uses violence to stop the people who slip through the cracks of the legal system, understanding that the system is not by any means fair, but working to try and protect people both within and without its boundaries. Matt's primary internal struggle is across interpretations, the extent to which he enjoys that violence. He would not go out every night to beat murderers and rapists unless there was some part of him that enjoyed the feeling of power, of righteous fury. His enjoyment of the violence is his sin. Then you have Frank. Frank is a violent man, he's not shy about it. He takes the provocative view that people need him, even if they abhor what he does. Hell, it's clear that Frank abhors himself. He's no hero, he sees himself as a necessary evil. At least, that's how he first appears. Daredevil interrogates Frank's ideas by literally interrogating Frank. It puts him on trial for his murders. Matt, Karen, and Foggy try their best to find some defense for him, but Frank refuses their counsel. He knows what he's done and he has no fear of admitting it. What he did was horrible but necessary, and now he will pay for it. That is, until the climax of the trial. Disgusted by the defense's attempts to insinuate that he is tortured by PTSD, seeing that as an insult to the veterans who truly struggle, Frank has an outburst. He admits to himself and to the world that he killed those people because he liked it. Hell, he loved it, and he's itching to do it again. And the second that he is back on the streets, he is just going to go back to his work because that is all he is. He's not traumatized, he's not confused, he is a murderer who would do it all again in a heartbeat, because he is the Punisher, and like Rorschach, he fights for his own selfish gratification. Matt's mortal sin is that he enjoys the violence. Frank's is that he has no sin. He is a killer who enjoys killing. No remorse, no penance, no repentance. What makes this trial so brilliant as a piece of writing is the extent to which it becomes a litigation of Matt's role in New York. Daredevil as a hero has just defeated Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime, and now a vigilante like him is being put on trial for doing the things that he would never allow himself to do, but crucially, that he wants to. In his closing arguments, Matt says that New York needs people like Frank, that Frank just went too far, that he needs help. But he's not saying that because he likes the Punisher, he's disgusted by him. He says that because in his mind he is litigating the existence of Daredevil, the existence of people who take violent extrajudicial action for their own purposes. On one hand, you have Matt desperately arguing that vigilantes commit acts of illegal violence to help others. On the other, you have Frank gladly admitting that he does it because he loves it. He not only blows a hole in his own defense's argument, he blows a hole in Matt's excuses for his actions as Daredevil. He's saying to Matt, I do this because I want to, and you are exactly the same. And that is how you tell a good Punisher story. Frank Castle is no protagonist. He enjoys what he does too much to serve as anything other than a symbol for the problematic ideals that he embodies, and any attempt to criticize this will run into contradiction with what the audience of a Punisher story wants. A Punisher series cannot be as critical of Frank as Watchmen is of Rorschach. Because of this, Frank Castle can exist only as foil. He exposes the holes in the excuses we make for other heroes. He allows us to examine the politics inherent to the idea of a strong man violently beating people to maintain some vague concept of justice. So to answer this video's original question, no, the Punisher is not left-wing. He is not your ally. He is no one's ally, not even his own. And you shouldn't want him to be, because he is the rot in society, the idea that more individual violence is what's needed to right our wrongs. He is the question we can never answer. He is the dark reflection of the characters that we happily cheer for. And when the stars align, when the writer sees these contradictions, when he is used well, he forces us to ask why we're cheering at all.